Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're plunging into a topic that touches nearly everyone's daily life, whether they realize it or not. Fast fashion. It's that irresistible thrill of new trends at unbelievable prices, the constant cascade of fresh styles. But what are the unseen gears turning behind those quickly rotating racks and endless online drops?
Exactly. Our mission today is to truly unpack the entire ecosystem of fast fashion. We're going to explore its surprising origins, the immense economic engine it represents, and, crucially, its profound and often hidden environmental and social impacts. We want to go beyond the headlines and help you understand what it truly means to dress in an era of rapid consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a fascinating stack of material to explore, revealing the intricate ways this industry operates, the complex challenges it creates, and importantly, what alternatives are emerging for consumers like you who want to be more informed and make more conscious choices. So let's peel back the layers and dive deep into this phenomenon.
Defining fast fashion, the need for speed.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. When we say fast fashion, what exactly are we talking about as a concept? And maybe more importantly, how has it become such a dominant force in our wardrobes, almost seemingly overnight?
Right. At its core, fast fashion is fundamentally a business model. It's defined by incredible agility and, well, speed. It's about quickly replicating high fashion designs, catwalk trends, mass producing them at an incredibly low cost, and then getting them onto retail shelves or into online stores with remarkable speed. While demand is at its absolute peak, that timing is crucial.
Okay.
The term also broadly describes the products themselves, the clothing and footwear that result from this rapid-fire production and distribution model. Think of it as a constant accelerated cycle of trend creation, production, and consumption.
So it's all about speed, accessibility, and essentially accelerating the trend cycle. High turnover, inexpensive, trendy clothing.
Yeah.
But how different is that from how the fashion industry used to operate? Because I know it wasn't always this way, right?
Oh, completely different. Historically, the fashion industry worked on a very predictable, much slower four-season cycle. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Designers would anticipate customer preferences months, sometimes even a year, in advance. They'd create collections that would slowly trickle down to stores. It was a measured, almost stately pace compared to now. But in the 1960s and 70s, we started to see a significant shift. Younger generations began creating their own street-level trends, challenging this traditional top-down model. Even then, though, a clear distinction between luxury and high-street fashion still existed.
Right, you knew the difference.
Exactly. Fast fashion, especially by the 21st century, completely blurred those lines. It dramatically increased mass consumption. It essentially democratized trend following, making designer-inspired looks accessible to almost everyone almost immediately, and at prices that made them almost irresistible. That accessibility is key.
You've set the historical stage perfectly. Now let's talk about the sheer scale we're witnessing today. The numbers themselves are truly eye-opening. Globally, a staggering 80 billion pieces of new clothing are purchased each year.
80 billion.
Just think about that for a moment. That's roughly 10 brand new outfits for every single person on the planet, every single year.
It's mind-boggling.
It's a consumption rate that was simply unimaginable a few decades ago. It's transformed fashion from a seasonal event into this relentless daily churn.
And that churn isn't just about quantity. It represents a colossal economic engine. This global purchase volume translates to an astounding $1.2 trillion annually for the global fashion industry.
1.2 trillion.
Yes, but the story gets even starker when we look at individual consumption and its impact on waste. For Americans, approximately 85% of the clothing they consume, which is nearly 3.8 billion pounds annually,
Wow.
ends up as solid waste in landfills.
85%.
Yeah, that's about 80 pounds of clothing per American every single year. It paints a very stark picture of what disposable fashion truly means, leading to the unfortunate moniker that fast fashion has become synonymous with disposable fashion.
It's incredible to think about the journey from handcrafted garments to billions of items annually. To truly understand this acceleration, though, we need to go back further. Before the 19th century, fashion was an incredibly laborious, time-consuming process. What did that actually look like?
It was a world away from today's instant gratification.
Yeah.
Before the 19th century, imagine the effort involved. First, sourcing raw materials like wool or cotton, which was itself an extensive agricultural undertaking, dependent on seasons and manual labor.
Right, just getting the material was hard work.
Exactly. Then, meticulously processing those raw fibers and painstakingly weaving them into fabric. That required significant skill, specialized looms, immense time. Only after all that could one even begin the meticulous task of cutting and hand-stitching that fabric into functional garments. Each piece was a significant investment of time, skill, and resources, truly a craft, not an industry in the modern sense.
And then came the Industrial Revolution. That was the moment everything changed, wasn't it? The big turning point.
Precisely. That was the game changer, not just for manufacturing, but for the entire concept of what clothing could be. New technologies, most notably the sewing machine and various textile machines like the power loom, completely transformed everything.
Suddenly things got faster.
Much faster. Clothes became not only cheaper, but also much easier and faster to make and buy. This era also saw the emergence of localized dressmaking businesses. Now, while they brought clothes to more people, they often employed workroom and home-based garment workers for meager wages, very low wages.
Ah, so the roots of...
Yeah, in essence, these were the early prototypes of what we now call sweatshops, laying some of the problematic groundwork for today's industry. The drive for efficiency often came at a human cost, even back then.
So the seeds of both mass production and these profound labor concerns were sown incredibly early on. It wasn't some new recent invention, but a gradual evolution. Lauren Bravo, a cosmopolitan journalist, even traces fast fashion's lineage back to things like utility clothing during wartime and the advent of mass-produced, affordable suits for men.
That makes sense. Practical needs driving production.
Right. And early companies like Inditex, which later founded Zara and Chelsea Girl, showed real commercial acumen in the 1960s, quickly adapting to trends. But the brand Biba, with its distinctive aesthetic, rapid turnover, and accessible pricing in that era, truly endured as an icon of that nascent fast fashion movement.
Biba, yeah, that's a name that comes up often in this context.
But this really takes us back. When we talk about the global phenomenon we see today, the scale of it. Which major players truly took these initial ideas and scaled them into the behemoths they are now?
Right, it wasn't just one company. The fast fashion phenomenon doesn't have a single origin point, but rather several key players who were instrumental in shaping and scaling this rapid production model into the global force it is today. One of the most influential figures, definitely, was Amancio Ortega, the founder of Zara.
Zara, okay.
Established in 1963 in Galicia, Spain, Zara quickly gained prominence by offering affordable imitations of high-end fashion trends, alongside their own original designs. By 1975, Ortega opened the first European retail outlet for his collections, pioneering what was then a revolutionary short-term production and distribution model.
So even then, it was about speed.
Yes. And when Zara expanded to New York in the early 1990s, their ability to bring a designer's idea from the drawing board to store shelves in as little as 15 days. That was so groundbreaking that the New York Times actually coined the term fast fashion, specifically to describe Zara's business model.
15 days. That 15-day turnaround from concept to store is absolutely incredible, particularly for that era. But it makes me wonder, how did they do it? What made Zara so uniquely efficient compared to their contemporaries? Were there challenges even then?
Well, that 15-day cycle was revolutionary, and it was primarily down to their strategic supply chain. There's a 2008 article, Fast Fashion Lessons by Sol and Turconi, that highlighted this. Zara kept the complicated, capital-intensive operations in-house.
Like what?
Things like computer-guided fabric cutting and dyeing.
Right.
This allowed them tight control over quality and precision in the early stages, ensuring they could respond rapidly to design changes.
Right.
But they smartly outsourced the more labor-intensive garment sewing to a vast network of local subcontractors and seamstress operatives, mostly in Galicia. This hybrid approach allowed for incredible flexibility and speed.
Okay, so a mix of in-house tech and outsourced labor.
Precisely. It allowed them to quickly update designs, resulting in incredibly short product cycles. The garments didn't sit on shelves for long, which created a sense of urgency and exclusivity for consumers, that fear of missing out. Up to 85% of Zara's merchandise could be changed mid-season.
Wow, 85%. That definitely drives repeat visits.
Absolutely. Another giant in the industry is H&M, founded by Erling Persson in Sweden way back in 1947. Person's inspiration apparently struck when he traveled to New York City in 1946 and was just blown away by the high-volume fashion production he saw there.
So he brought that idea back to Europe.
He did. H&M expanded rapidly, establishing 42 stores across Europe between 1960 and 1979, and broadened their offerings beyond just women's clothing to include men's and children's wear. The groundwork for their global expansion was really laid in the 1980s when H&M acquired Rolls, a Swedish mail-order company.
Leveraging existing networks.
Exactly. Leveraging its networks to sell fast fashion via catalog and mail order. By the 1990s, they were investing heavily in large city billboard advertising featuring celebrities and supermodels.
making H&M a household name.
Their truly global push began with the opening of their flagship USA store on Fifth Avenue in New York City in 2000. Today, H&M typically produces about 12 to 16 collections a year, which is still a far cry from the traditional 4 seasons, reflecting their commitment to constant newness.
12 to 16 collections a year, still incredibly fast compared to the old model.
Definitely. And then there's the more recent, but arguably even more dominant phenomenon, Shein.
Ah, yes, Shein. They seem to be everywhere online.
They really do. Originating in Nanjing, China in 2008, it was initially founded by entrepreneur Chris Xu to sell online wedding dresses, believe it or not.
Wedding dresses, wow.
Yeah. By 2020, Shein had become an absolute juggernaut, making $10 billion in revenue. And that soared to an astonishing $100 billion valuation in 2022.
$100 billion.
During the global COVID-19 pandemic, while many businesses struggled, Shein saw an incredible spike in sales. They even overtook long-established competitors like H&M and Zara in market share.
So, given that massive scale and rapid growth, what does it mean for their production model? How do they achieve that kind of output? It almost defies the logic of even Zara's model.
It's quite unique. Shein's business model leverages a structure similar to Amazon's, but applied directly to fashion. They partner with thousands of third-party suppliers, primarily located in China, but also increasingly in Brazil and Turkey for manufacturing and shipping.
Okay, a decentralized network.
Very decentralized. What truly sets them apart is their extreme test and repeat model. Instead of planning large collections, they produce a very small quantity, typically just 100 to 200 units of a new item.
Just 100 or 2.
Right. And then, based on real-time sales data and popularity gathered almost instantly from online interactions, clicks, add to carts, they rapidly scale up production for whatever becomes popular.
Because they react almost instantly to demand.
Exactly. This allows them to churn out an incredible number of new garments. Sources say up to 10,000 new items a day.
10,000 a day? That's astounding.
It is. They essentially operate through this huge network of 6,000 different small factories across China, making them incredibly agile. To advertise, they leverage TV stars like Khloe Kardashian, sure, but their real power lies in extensively using social media influencers, especially through those ubiquitous haul videos on platforms like YouTube and TikTok.
Right, the haul videos are everywhere.
This strategy surged during the pandemic, directly contributing to Shein bringing in about $10 billion in revenue that year. It just shows the immense power of this new, digitally driven marketing frontier.
The economics and strategy behind the speed.
Okay, so it's clear that fast fashion is a major economic force, transforming the retail landscape and really our relationship with clothing. What kind of numbers are we talking about here in terms of its overall economic success and trajectory?
Well, economically, fast fashion has been incredibly successful for the retail industry worldwide. No question about that. In 2020, the global fast fashion market produced an impressive $25.1 billion.
$25 billion.
But that was merely a stepping stone. It was expected to increase at an annual compound growth rate of 21.9%, reaching $31 billion in 2021.
That's huge growth year on year.
Absolutely. And looking ahead, by 2030, it's estimated that the fast fashion industry will generate an astounding $192 billion in revenue for the global economy.
Wow, nearly $200 billion by 2030.
Yes. This is a sector that is not just growing, but exploding. It demonstrates a remarkable ability to capture consumer spending and market share globally.
That's truly massive growth, projecting almost a 6-fold increase in less than a decade from that 2021 figure. Where does this immense profit largely come from? Are there particular regions or strategic advantages that fuel it?
A lot of this economic growth is heavily fueled by manufacturing in developing countries across Asia. Think India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, China, Indonesia, Cambodia.
Right, manufacturing hubs.
Exactly. These economies often rely heavily on fast fashion consumption, with a significant portion of their export earnings coming directly from ready-made clothes. China, for example, has gained a yearly profit reported at a staggering $158.4 billion just from exporting such clothing.
Wow. That highlights a really complex global reliance, doesn't it?
It does. The economic success of fast fashion brands is intrinsically linked to the manufacturing capabilities. And let's be frank, the competitive labor costs in these regions. It's a symbiotic, though often imbalanced, relationship.
Okay, so beyond just low production costs and these super efficient supply chains, how do these companies continuously keep us, the consumers, coming back for more? It feels like there's always something new, a constant desire for the next item, almost like an addiction sometimes.
Marketing is an absolutely key driver in this cycle, and it goes far beyond traditional advertising. It's designed to create an almost insatiable desire for the consumption of new designs, as close as possible to the point of creation.
So it taps into that immediacy.
Yes. The entire narrative promoted by fast fashion is about something that is fast, low-priced, and seemingly disposable. The continuous release of new products isn't just about selling clothes. It essentially makes the garments themselves a highly cost-effective marketing tool.
How so?
Well, each new drop drives consumer visits, whether online or in-store. It dramatically increases brand awareness just by constantly being new, and ultimately it results in higher rates of consumer purchases. It's a self-perpetuating cycle where the product itself serves as its own advertisement, constantly refreshing the consumer's feed and desire.
So it's not just about selling individual clothing items, it's about driving constant engagement and frequent returns to the store or website. It's a clever way to keep the brand top of mind. But does this strategy also, maybe unintentionally, contribute to that sense of disposability we discussed earlier by constantly pushing newness over longevity?
Absolutely. It's almost inherent in the model. And this strategy also directly contributes to their higher profit margins. Fast fashion companies generally have a lower markdown percentage, typically around 15%, compared to their traditional competitors, who might see markdowns exceeding 30%, sometimes even more, to clear out seasonal stock.
Okay, so they sell more at closer to full price.
Exactly. This efficiency in selling items closer to full price is built into their rapid model. The business model effectively reduces time cycles from production to consumption, stimulating sales through trends that change throughout the seasons. Where the traditional annual fashion seasons, summer, autumn, winter, spring, used to dictate buying patterns, these have now compressed into shorter periods of merely 4-6 weeks, and sometimes even less for the ultra-fast players.
Oh, they've created more seasons.
Effectively, yes. Marketers have masterfully created more buying seasons within the same calendar year, maximizing opportunities for sales and ensuring there's always a new arrival to pique interest.
And how do they actually advertise? Do they all spend big on traditional ads, or are there different approaches to capturing that consumer attention in this fast-paced environment?
It varies. While some companies do invest heavily in advertising, others, like Primark, famously operate with virtually no traditional advertising budget.
Really? How do they manage that?
Instead, they invest heavily in their in-store experience. They focus meticulously on store layout, visual merchandising, creating that instant hook the moment you walk in. Research actually shows that a remarkable 75% of consumers' decisions are made right there, in front of a display fixture, within a mere 3 seconds.
3 seconds, wow.
It highlights the power of visual appeal and immediate gratification in the fast fashion retail environment. It shows that the physical store itself can be an incredibly powerful marketing tool.
I'm genuinely struck by how integrated social media has become with fast fashion. It feels like a perfect match, maybe not made in heaven, but certainly a highly effective marketing strategy. How has this digital landscape fundamentally changed the game for fast fashion brands, especially for newer players like Shein?
Oh, social media has become incredibly powerful for fast fashion. It almost perfectly aligns with its core tenets of speed and trendiness. Initially, social media was just for connecting people, right? But it very quickly became this pervasive platform for retailers to promote products and directly influence consumer behavior.
You can see products styled instantly.
Exactly. Consumers can look at products and businesses on social media, see how they're styled by real people, not just models, and even read real customer reviews before ever heading to a store or making an online purchase. Fast fashion retailers like Boohoo.com were quick to realize that social media ads were a tremendously effective way to reach their target audience, young girls and Gen Z.
Right in their feed.
Constantly. They hoped that constant exposure, every time users opened Instagram or TikTok, would drive website visits and ultimately purchases. And instead of just traditional polished ads, they pioneered the widespread use of social media influencers.
The influencers are key.
Hugely key. These are often perceived as regular individuals who have accrued large followings, and their followers often trust them implicitly, sometimes even more than traditional celebrities. When an influencer wears a Shein outfit or does one of those haul videos showing off a huge box of clothes, their followers often feel compelled to purchase it too. It creates a direct, almost frictionless pathway from screen to purchase.
And those haul videos exploded during the pandemic, didn't they?
They really did. This surge in social media marketing was particularly evident then, with Shein taking center stage through these haul videos, people recording themselves showing large quantities of purchased items. These videos garnered billions of views and directly contributed to Shein, bringing in about $10 billion in revenue that year. It just demonstrates the immense, almost unparalleled power of this new marketing frontier.
The environmental price tag.
Okay, this all sounds like a roaring success story for business. An economic engine running at full throttle, fueled by social media and rapid production. But what about the environmental consequences? What does this constant cycle of rapid production and consumption really mean for our planet, for the air we breathe, the water we drink?
Right, the environmental impact of fast fashion is a truly serious issue. And frankly, it's something a lot of the population perhaps doesn't fully acknowledge, or maybe doesn't fully grasp its scale. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, while the fast fashion system undeniably provides opportunities for economic growth, the entire industry significantly hinders broader sustainability efforts. It's a fundamental conflict between rapid profit and planetary health.
How so? Can you break down some of the specific ways it impacts the environment beyond just the general idea of pollution? What are the big hitters?
Certainly. Let's start with climate change. The global fashion industry is responsible for an estimated 2% of global carbon emissions per year.
2% of global emissions.
Yes. And fast fashion, with its intense production cycles and reliance on synthetic materials, is a massive contributor to this figure. Now, the UNESCO still quotes a range of 2–8% as of 2025, but a strong 2021 World Resources Institute report places it at 2%.
Okay. And why is it so carbon intensive?
It's largely due to energy-intensive production, particularly in manufacturing. Consider the production of polyester.
Which is everywhere in fast fashion.
Exactly. It's a synthetic material manufactured directly from fossil fuels, making it emits significant amounts of greenhouse gases. Most polyester is made in China, where carbon trading schemes, basically markets for buying permits to emit CO2, often have much lower prices than in places like the EU.
Less incentive to cut emissions.
Precisely. There's less financial incentive for factories there to invest in cleaner energy and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Reducing reliance on coal-fired power stations in major manufacturing countries like China, India, and Pakistan would be a crucial step in mitigating this massive carbon footprint.
What about other forms of pollution beyond carbon emissions? Are there issues with water, chemicals, or maybe less visible types of waste that might surprise us?
Oh, absolutely. Water's a huge one. The industry contributes a staggering 20% of global wastewater.
A fifth of all industrial wastewater.
Yes. It uses about 93 billion cubic meters of water annually for manufacturing processes. That's an almost unimaginable volume. To put that into perspective, a singular cotton t-shirt alone requires over 2,000 liters of water to make.
2,000 liters for one t-shirt.
Yeah, that's roughly the amount of water an average person drinks in 2.5 years.
Incredible.
Beyond water quantity, there's quality. Various pesticides used in conventional cotton farming and toxic dyes used in textile finishing are routinely released into the environment by fashion-related operations. This continuously adds effluent wastewater from textile factories, containing both dyes and caustic solutions, directly into waterways.
Contaminating local water sources.
Exactly. These hazardous substances don't just affect the environment. They contaminate ecosystems, impact workers' health, and even pose risks to the consumers who wear the clothes. Take Shein again, for instance. They contributed an estimated 16.7 million total metric tons of carbon dioxide in 2023, just from their direct operations and supply chain.
16 million tons.
And they also contribute to 20% of freshwater pollution and a startling 35% of microplastics polluted into the environment each year.
Microplastics? Ooh, how?
This is largely because a massive 76% of their products use polyester. And polyester, being a plastic-based fabric, easily sheds microplastics, especially during washing. And shockingly, only about 6% of those clothing items are ever recycled. The rest just persists.
So we're consuming more, the act of producing these items is polluting more, the materials themselves are problematic. What happens to all these clothes when they're no longer wanted, when they fall out of trend, which is happening faster than ever, or simply wear out? Where do they ultimately go?
Well, this leads directly to a massive waste problem. A truly visual representation of overconsumption that is piling up globally. Elizabeth L. Klein, author of Overdressed, The Shockingly High Cost of Cheap Fashion, she notes that Americans are now purchasing 5 times the amount of clothing than they did in 1980.
5 times more.
Yes. Due to this astronomical rise in consumption, developed countries are producing more and more garments each season. The U.S. imports over 1 billion garments annually from China alone.
1 billion just from China.
The UK's textile consumption surged by 37% in just 4 years, from 2001 to 2005. And globally, in 2018, fiber production reached an all-time high of 107 million metric tons. Imagine the sheer volume of stuff being made.
So what does that translate to in terms of actual waste piling up in our communities and across the globe? Can you give us a sense of the scale, like in pounds or tons?
The sheer volume of waste is staggering. The average American household produces 70 pounds of textile waste every single year.
70 pounds per household.
Yet to visualize that, it's like throwing out a small suitcase full of clothes annually, consistently, year after year. Residents of New York City, for example, discard around 193,000 tons of clothing and textiles annually. That equates to 6% of all the city's garbage.
6% of NYC's garbage is just clothes?
Textiles, yeah. Across the pond, the European Union generates a total of 5.8 million tons of textiles each year. As a whole, the textile industry now occupies roughly 5% of all landfill space globally.
5% of landfill space?
Yes. This means the clothing industry produces about 92 million tons of textile waste annually. The vast majority of this, much like in the U.S., is either burned, releasing pollutants, or goes directly into a landfill. And less than 1% of used clothing is actually being recycled into new garments.
Less than 1%.
It's incredibly low.
Yeah.
And a significant portion of this discarded clothing is made from non-biodegradable synthetic materials like polyester, meaning it just sits there for centuries, slowly breaking down into microplastics.
And it's not just the clothes themselves, right? You mentioned packaging earlier. It's the entire ecosystem of packaging and logistics that adds to the waste burden.
You're absolutely right. The packaging alone is a hidden environmental cost that adds up incredibly fast. Fast fashion packaging accounts for a substantial 40% of plastic waste, according to a 2022 OECD report.
40% of plastic waste from packaging.
Yes, an enormous volume of single-use plastic that often accompanies each inexpensive garment. Polybags, hangers, tags, and a recent survey found that nearly 10% of the microplastics found in the ocean actually come from textile waste and discarded fashion clothing.
So it's reaching the oceans directly.
It is, further highlighting the widespread impact, even far from land. Even the convenient process of returning items contributes significantly. Opsero, a returns optimization company, estimates that 5 billion pounds of waste are generated through returns each year in the U.S. alone.
5 billion pounds just from returns.
Yes, and that process adds another 15 million metric tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere due to transportation, reprocessing, often just disposal. It's truly an all-encompassing environmental footprint, from production to disposal and even reverse logistics.
Labor and human rights concerns.
Okay, beyond the environmental impact, which is clearly immense and pervasive, let's talk about the people making these clothes.
Yeah.
What's the human cost behind those irresistible prices that drive so much consumption?
This is a critical and often heartbreaking area of concern. The fashion industry is known as the most labor-dependent industry globally. An estimated 1 in every 6 people on Earth works in some part of the supply chain, from acquiring raw materials to manufacturing clothing.
1 in 6. That's huge.
It is. And labor practices in fast fashion are often exploitative. There's an increasing concern for sweatshops, particularly as more fast fashion stores relentlessly lower their prices and trends fluctuate more frequently. This puts immense pressure on production timelines and costs.
Which gets passed down to the workers.
Exactly. Brands like GAP, Abercrombie Fitch, and Banana Republic, among many others, have been cited over the years as companies that utilize sweatshops within their supply chains, often through third-party contractors where transparency is lacking.
So what's fascinating here is the direct intersection of economics and human rights. How does this relentless quest for low cost directly impact the actual workers on the ground, creating these cycles of exploitation?
Well, outsourcing production to low-wage countries, while economically beneficial for the brands and for consumers seeking affordability, directly perpetuates cycles of dependence and inequality in these manufacturing regions. In many developing countries, garment laborers, on average, are expected to work incredibly long hours, often 11 hours a day, sometimes more, simply to reach the production targets driven by the insatiable consumer demands from the U.S. and Europe.
11 hours a day.
And for very low pay. For context, if these workers were to work a standard 40-hour week, their monthly income might be around $858. Now, while this might be higher than some other available jobs in certain developing countries, it is still significantly lower than what would be considered a living wage, or even the standard of living in the US or Europe.
A huge disparity.
It creates a system where the pursuit of cheap goods directly translates to challenging, often unsafe, and fundamentally unsustainable living and working conditions for those at the bottom of the supply chain.
And who are these workers primarily? You mentioned the scale, but are there specific demographics that are more affected? Why are they particularly vulnerable in this labor-intensive industry?
A crucial demographic here is women. Women make up a staggering 85–90% of the garment workforce in South, Southeast, and East Asia.
85 to 90% are women.
Yes, this gender concentration makes them disproportionately vulnerable to exploitation. Many of these factories are located in what are called export processing zones, or EPZs.
EPZs, what are those exactly?
The International Labor Organization defines them as industrial zones with special incentives set up to attract foreign investors. Basically, areas designed to attract foreign companies by offering tax breaks, streamlined regulations, and sometimes weaker labor protections.
So what are the specific issues associated with these export processing zones? It sounds like they might be a bit of a loophole for labor standards.
Indeed, they often function that way. These zones have been widely criticized for enabling substandard working conditions, notoriously low wages, and, crucially, the suspension of both international and domestic labor laws, which would otherwise protect workers' rights to organize, bargain collectively, etc.
So the usual protections might not apply.
Correct. Within some EPZs, such as those in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the Philippines, women account for an even higher percentage of the working population, often between 70 and 90%. Despite their overwhelming presence in these production jobs, they are still likely to earn less than men.
Why is that?
This discrepancy is often due to employers preferring to hire men in technical and managerial positions, which are better paid, relegating women to lower-skilled, more precarious production work. Compounding this, employers also tend to prefer hiring women for these production jobs because they are often perceived, unfairly, as more compliant and less likely to join labor unions or advocate for their rights.
So it's a systemic vulnerability built into the economic model.
Precisely.
This raises a profoundly important question, given these systemic issues. Have there been specific, high-profile incidents or reports that have really brought widespread global attention to these significant labor and safety issues within the fast fashion industry? Events that shocked the world and maybe forced a conversation?
Yes, tragically there have been. The most prominent example is the 2013 Dhaka garment factory collapse in Bangladesh.
Rana Plaza.
Exactly, Rana Plaza. The building, which housed several garment factories supplying major Western brands, collapsed. It was the deadliest garment-related accident in world history. Over 1,100 people were killed and thousands more were injured. It brought unprecedented and devastating attention to the unsafe working conditions that underpin the low prices of fast fashion.
It really exposed the true cost.
It did. Beyond such catastrophic events, reports also shed light on pervasive daily abuses. For instance, a report that interviewed Sri Lankan women working in EPZs found that gender-based violence was a dominant theme in their narratives. A shocking 38% reported seeing or experiencing sexual harassment within their workplace.
38%?
Yes. These incidents, both the catastrophic and the everyday, underscore the very real human cost of fast fashion, highlighting that the cheap prices often come at the expense of fundamental human dignity and safety.
So what does this all mean for a massive, modern, fast fashion company like Shein? Given its enormous scale and hyper-rapid production model, how does their operation fit into these broader labor concerns we've been discussing?
Shein produces its clothing primarily using what are known as Guangzhou workshops in southern China. These workshops operate specifically to produce a large amount of clothing items at incredibly cheap prices, and significantly, often without paying the tariffs that larger, more formal operations might incur. This helps keep costs down.
And the conditions in these workshops?
The working hours for employees are notoriously fickle and unpredictable, often lasting more than 10 hours a day. Some workers are recordedly paid as little as US $5 per hour. To cut costs further, many of these employees rent small, cramped rooms directly above the factories themselves, sleeping on bunk beds and paying around US $130 per month for lodging.
Living right there.
Yes. A Wired investigation specifically revealed that Shein workers often endure grueling 75-hour shifts in factories that shockingly lack sufficient windows or emergency exits, raising serious safety concerns and highlighting extreme working conditions.
75-hour weeks.
Yes. And this intense labor environment is becoming harder to sustain. With two-thirds of 18-year-olds in China now going to college, the number of young people willing to work in these physically taxing clothing workshops has decreased. This leads to fewer employees available and increasing complaints about the demanding work conditions. It's a model built on constant pressure and, historically, a readily available, often vulnerable workforce.
Okay, so beyond labor exploitation, there's another ethical concern that frequently surfaces in the fast fashion world: outright design copying or design piracy. How does the fast fashion model intersect with intellectual property rights, and what are the consequences for independent designers or even established brands?
Right. The very business model of fast fashion is predicated on quickly replicating recent catwalk trends and high fashion designs. Sometimes this involves inspiration, but often it crosses the line into directly copying the work of smaller independent artists or other brands.
Taking designs without permission.
Essentially, yes. This inherent practice has led to numerous, often high-profile lawsuits. In the U.S., legislative attempts have been made to address this, like the proposed Design Piracy Prohibition Act. This aimed to protect fashion designers' copyrights, granting a 3-year protection term for original designs and imposing fines for infringement.
Did that pass?
It faced challenges and hasn't become law in that form. And the nature of fast fashion speed often means a design can be copied, produced, sold out, and disappear from shelves before a lawsuit can even gain real traction. It's hard for the law to keep up.
So has this actually led to significant lawsuits against major fast fashion brands? Or are these just legal threats that rarely materialize? Have big companies been successfully sued?
Oh, absolutely. It has led to real and very public lawsuits against major players. As far back as 2007, Forever 21, a large fast fashion retailer at the time, was involved in several lawsuits over alleged violations of intellectual property rights. These lawsuits contended that their merchandise infringed on designs from very well-known designers like Diane von Furstenberg, Anna Sui, and Gwen Stefani's Harajuku Lovers line.
So established names were targeted too.
Yes. More recently, in 2023, 2 graphic designers specifically sued Shein for both copyright infringement and racketeering. They claim that Shein identically copied their graphic designs. Krista Perry, for example, claimed Shein copied her Make It Fun design from wall art onto clothing. J. Barron's Try My Best design appeared on Shein as embroidered patches despite him having a registered copyright. Another artist saw their copyrighted Orange Days' floral pattern similarly copied.
Directly copied.
That was the claim. These designers claimed significant loss of profits as a direct result of these infringements, highlighting the real financial and creative impact of design piracy on individual artists and smaller brands in this industry. It's a constant battle for creators to protect their work against rapid, large-scale replication.
Counter-movements and alternative.
Okay, given all these deep concerns we've discussed, the immense environmental damage, the widespread labor exploitation, the issue of design piracy, what are the alternatives? How are people and even parts of the industry trying to push back against this relentless tide of fast fashion? Is there another way?
Yes, definitely. In direct opposition to the fast fashion model, the slow fashion or conscious fashion movement has risen as a powerful counter-narrative. This movement directly takes issue with fast fashion's immense responsibility for pollution, both from production and synthetic fabric, decay, its typically poor workmanship leading to short lifespans, and its singular emphasis on fleeting trends over classic enduring style.
So it's a rejection of those core tenets.
It is. It's a fundamental philosophical shift from more, faster, cheaper to less, better lasting.
So what does slow fashion emphasize instead? What are its core principles, and how does it aim to change our relationship with clothing?
Instead of speed and disposability, slow fashion emphasizes quality clothing. Garments designed to be much more enduring pieces that will last for years, not just a season or two. In the 2020 spring-summer fashion season, for example, we saw high-end designers really leading this movement, creating pieces developed from environmentally friendly practices. It showed that luxury and sustainability can go hand in hand.
Right, designers leading the way.
Yes, and luxury designers like Stella McCartney have focused on sustainable and ethical practices since the 1990s, long before it became a mainstream concern. She famously rejected fur and leather for ethical alternatives early on. British Vogue even explained that the process of designing and creating clothing in slow fashion involves a deep consciousness of the materials used, prioritizing natural, recycled, or upcycled fabrics, careful consideration of consumer demand to avoid overproduction and waste, and a clear understanding of the climate impact throughout the entire life cycle of a garment.
A more holistic view.
Exactly. It's about thoughtful creation and consumption, fostering a deeper connection to what we wear, valuing it more.
That sounds incredibly promising, a hopeful vision for the future of fashion. But I have heard some critiques of the slow fashion movement, too. It sounds great in theory, but is it truly accessible to everyone? Or does it inadvertently create a new kind of exclusivity where only the wealthy can participate?
You're absolutely right, and that's a very important and valid critique that needs to be considered. Rimi Khan, in her 2016 article, Doing Good and Looking Good, Women in Fast Fashion Activism, criticized slow fashion for primarily catering to a mostly Western, wealthy, and female demographic.
Why is that?
She pointed out that because most slow fashion products are significantly more expensive than their fast fashion counterparts due to better materials, fair wages, smaller production runs, consumers need a certain amount of disposable income to participate. Khan argues that this inadvertently positions wealthier women as the primary agents of change through their purchasing power, while the shopping habits of lower-income women, who are often limited by financial constraints and simply need affordable clothing for themselves or their families, are often considered problematic within that discourse.
That's a really difficult tension.
It is. Andrea Chang provided a similar critique, suggesting that because most consumers are limited by financial factors, perhaps anti-fast fashion activists should target lawmakers, manufacturers, and investors to enact systemic change, rather than solely focusing on individual consumer choices or creating an alternative industry accessible only to a select few. It highlights that while individual choices are important, the problem is deeply systemic and requires systemic solutions too.
That's a really important distinction, understanding that individual choices are part of a larger systemic issue, and affordability is a real barrier. So if you, as a consumer, want to identify truly sustainable brands and avoid falling for what some call greenwashing, how can you do that? It feels like every brand claims to be eco or conscious now.
You've hit on a critical point. Greenwashing is rampant. But there is a greater incentive now for the industry to shift from that linear take, make, dispose business model towards a value chain and a circular economy, which aims for biodegradable textiles, recycled content, and products designed for longevity or easier recycling.
So what should you look for?
When you're looking for a truly sustainable brand, you should seek out those that are transparent. Transparency is key. Look for brands that produce their products in safe working conditions. Do they publish factory lists, audit reports? Do they use genuinely environmentally friendly materials, and can they back that up with certifications? Do they offer fair wages throughout their supply chain? Are they actively working to reduce their carbon footprint at every stage? Verifiable practices are crucial.
Okay, transparency and verification. What are some examples of brands that genuinely claim to do this, and how do they demonstrate their commitment beyond just marketing slogans?
Well, many genuinely sustainable brands like Everlane, Patagonia, Quince, and Veja heavily publicize relevant details about their company practices and supply chains. They often allow shoppers like you to make educated decisions by providing that information upfront.
So they put the info out there.
Yes. Patagonia and Veja, for instance, focus on guaranteeing their clothing and shoes, making it possible for repairs to be made to broken or worn-down pieces rather than needing replacement. Patagonia has a robust repair program, the Worn Wear Initiative, and uses recycled materials extensively. They're very open about factory connections, ethical production processes, environmental impact data, and they use their advertising slogans to explicitly put forth their sustainable business message, sometimes even telling people not to buy new things.
Right, like the "don't buy this jacket" ad.
Exactly. They back up their claims with action and transparency in a way that builds trust.
What's fascinating here is the concept of greenwashing. We hear that term a lot. It seems like many brands want to appear sustainable without actually doing the hard work or making fundamental changes. How can consumers spot that deceptive practice?
Yeah, greenwashing is a deceptive practice where companies provide selective or ambiguous information about their sustainability efforts, making them appear more environmentally friendly than they truly are. It's essentially misleading marketing.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A fast fashion company might claim their jeans are eco-friendly because they use a small percentage of organic cotton, maybe 10%, which sounds good on the label. However, they might then completely omit crucial information about the chemical-intensive dyeing and finishing processes used, which pollute water, or the exploitative labor practices in their factories, or the fact that the vast majority of their other products, maybe 96% of their line, are still made from virgin polyester derived from fossil fuels.
So they highlight one small positive thing.
Exactly. It makes the brand's claims about eco-friendly clothing highly questionable. Deceptive marketing strategies often use vague keywords like eco-friendly, sustainable, conscious collection, or no chemical use to mask a brand's actual production practices. This double talk makes it significantly harder for you to find truly sustainable brands. It requires a keen eye, critical thinking, and sometimes a little digging beyond the marketing headlines. If a claim seems vague or too good to be true, it probably needs more scrutiny.
Okay, so be skeptical, look for transparency and specifics.
Mhm.
If you're a learner listening to this and you want to be part of the solution to make a real difference with your consumption habits, to perhaps even shift away from the allure of fast fashion, what are some concrete, practical actions you can take in your daily life? Where can someone start?
One key concept is to try and purchase clothes with slow fashion principles in mind. Even if you're not buying from designated slow fashion brands, because those can be expensive. This means actively buying good quality, essentially timeless clothing with the intent for it to last a long time, enabling repeated wear.
Focusing on longevity.
Yes, it's a deliberate shift from buying many poor quality, cheap items to choosing perhaps fewer but better quality items that offer durability. Maybe they cost a bit more upfront, but less per wear over time. Thrifting, or buying secondhand, is another excellent and highly accessible option. It directly counters fast fashion's consumption model by extending the life cycle of existing garments. Visiting consignment stores, online marketplaces like Depop or Vinted, or local charity shops can yield fantastic finds, often unique pieces too.
And what about extending the life of clothes you already own? That seems like a very practical and immediate step for anyone, regardless of budget.
Absolutely critical. Learning to make and mend clothes, maybe using recycled materials or simply repairing existing items, is a powerful alternative to discarding them. Instead of immediately tossing a shirt with a torn seam or pants with a small hole, you can learn basic mending skills: patching, sewing a button back on, darning a small hole.
Skills our grandparents probably had.
Exactly. There are countless online tutorials and local workshops that teach these basic mending skills. Some people even get creative and use upcycled materials to make their own clothes through sewing, knitting, or crocheting, giving new life to old textiles and embracing a truly circular approach. Another great option is taking advantage of companies that offer repair or adjustment services.
You mentioned Patagonia.
Right. An athletic wear company, Lululemon, offers complimentary hemming on all tops and pants, ensuring a perfect fit, which makes you want to keep the item longer, reducing the need to buy new. Even footwear companies like Red Wing Boots will resole and restitch old footwear to significantly lengthen their life, keeping them out of landfill. A recent 2024 study even found that increased consumer awareness driven by education, government intervention, and effective social media campaigns highlighting these issues can significantly shift shopping behavior away from fast fashion towards more sustainable alternatives. It proves that your individual choices, when scaled collectively, really can make a difference.
Addressing waste at the source. Repair and supply chain innovation.
Okay, we've talked extensively about what happens to clothes after consumers discard them, contributing to those mountains of waste in landfills. But what about the waste generated before a garment even reaches the store or online cart? You touched on this briefly, the unseen fallout that happens within the supply chain itself.
Yes, this is a critical point that often gets overlooked in the consumer-facing conversation, and the numbers are quite shocking. Based on research from OCAD University in Canada, on average, a staggering 35% of all materials in the supply chain end up as waste before a garment even reaches the consumer.
35%, more than a third.
Yes, think about that. More than a third of the raw materials and processed fabrics never even make it into a piece of clothing someone buys. Furthermore, a truly immense 47% of all fiber entering the fashion value chain becomes waste throughout the myriad of different production stages, from the initial fiber processing to yarn spinning, fabric weaving or knitting, dyeing, finishing, and finally, garment cutting and sewing.
Almost half the input fiber is wasted.
Throughout the process, this is a huge volume of waste fabric rolls, scraps, damaged goods that never even sees a retail shelf, let alone a consumer's closet. It's pre-consumer waste.
That's an astonishing amount of waste happening even before a product is finished. So what's causing all this pre-consumer waste? It sounds like there are significant inefficiencies baked right into the production process itself.
There are several common culprits that contribute significantly to this pre-consumer fallout. Firstly, there's simple overordering. Manufacturers often order 10% more material than strictly necessary as a buffer.
Why?
As a buffer against potential issues like fabric defects, color inconsistencies, or just to ensure they can fulfill orders even if there are slight variations in quality or yield during cutting. Ironically, some luxury brands even instruct their manufacturers to destroy this overstock, literally burning or burying perfectly good fabric to protect their brand image and the perceived exclusivity of their unique designs, rather than selling it at a discount or allowing it to be repurposed.
Wow, intentional destruction.
Yes. Secondly, inconsistencies in fabric production are a major factor, especially with huge volumes. You get weaving errors, printing mistakes, color variations batch to batch that don't meet strict quality control standards. Portions of the fabric rolls are then deemed unusable for A-grade garments.
Okay, quality control issues.
Thirdly, cutting residues are largely unavoidable, though they can be minimized. When fabrics are marked, laid out, and cut into the pattern pieces for garments, even with conscious effort to optimize the layout using software, about 8–15% of the fabric, referred to as textile scraps and roll-ins, can end up on the cutting room floor. These are often irregular shapes, hard to reuse.
The offcuts.
Exactly. And finally, there are damages that occur during the cutting and sewing processes due to human negligence or machine malfunctions. Think tiny holes, oil stains from machines, needle marks. This entire category of pre-consumer waste or fallout comes in the form of semi-processed or processed textile rolls and garments. And most often, it's simply discarded, incinerated, or sent directly to a landfill, adding to the environmental burden before the clothes even begin their life with the consumer.
This raises a really important question. If there's so much waste generated before clothes even reach us at the manufacturing level, can we address it effectively right there? Is there a way to integrate repair or other circular practices higher up in the supply chain to intercept this waste rather than just dealing with it after the consumer is done?
Absolutely. And that's where some really interesting innovation is happening. Repairing defective garments is a significant and powerful solution that can be implemented directly at the manufacturing stage. Think about it. Unlike mechanical or chemical recycling, which are beneficial, don't get me wrong, but still consume more natural resources and generate additional greenhouse gas emissions through their complex processes.
Right, they require energy, water.
Exactly. Repairing doesn't require those new inputs or that energy for deconstruction and reconstruction. It's about fixing what's already there, preserving the value already embedded in the materials and labor, rather than breaking it down to build something new. While a life cycle assessment that's a study looking at environmental impact on 100% recycled yarns did show good reductions, like 62% less water, 33% less energy, 18% fewer GHG emissions compared to virgin materials, the potential of repair is even more direct and immediate in its resource savings. It's often the most efficient use of resources for slightly damaged goods.
That's a compelling environmental argument, highlighting how repair avoids new resource consumption. But what are the economic implications? Does integrating repair make financial sense for manufacturers and brands? Or is it just seen as an added cost, slowing things down?
This is where it gets really interesting. There are substantial economic incentives, which is what truly makes this a viable pathway forward for the industry, not just an environmental nice-to-have. Consider this. For just a small manufacturing facility, repairing only 3% of the defective garments that would otherwise be discarded could generate close to $1 million in bottom-line savings annually.
$1 million just from repairing 3%.
Yes, by recovering the value of those garments instead of writing them off as waste. Now, scale that up. If a major brand were to commit to repairing just 3% of the defective garments across its entire global supplier base, the hard savings could be close to $1 billion annually.
$1 billion.
Potentially, yes. And considering that sources estimate around 25.6% total waste in the supply chain comes from defective fabric, defective garments, and cutting residue. Repairing even just 10% of this massive quantity could lead to hard savings of a couple of $2 billion across the industry. These are not insignificant figures. They represent a powerful business case for embracing repair, turning what was once considered unavoidable waste into recovered value and profit.
That's a powerful incentive for sure, making the financial argument for sustainability very clear. It flips the script from cost to savings. And if this approach were truly adopted across the industry, how would it fundamentally reshape the business model for these large-scale manufacturers and brands? What would be the biggest change they'd have to make, and what would it mean for the end product reaching us?
It would require, first and foremost, a transformative shift in mindset and operations, away from just volume and speed towards value recovery and resource efficiency. Brands could actively incentivize their manufacturers, perhaps through adjusted contracts or shared savings models, to turn every yard of fabric and every semi-processed garment that is currently set aside as waste into a finished, sellable garment.
Changing the incentives.
Precisely. This method, if followed systematically, could yield an additional 5–15% more finished units than before, directly boosting output without consuming new resources. That's huge efficiency gain. Any garment successfully repaired to a high standard could then be shipped as a grade, meaning perfect, first quality, and sold at full retail price, recovering maximum value.
Okay.
While garments with noticeable minor defects, even after repair, could still be sold transparently at a discount, perhaps labeled as such, much like pre-loved or refurbished garments sold online today. It creates a new revenue stream and drastically reduces pure waste.
So it adds tiers of product value.
Exactly. Furthermore, if we could repair more garments at the source, the burden on traditional energy-intensive recycling processes would also be lessened, creating a cascading positive effect throughout the entire supply chain. It moves them much closer to a truly circular economy. Ultimately, brands ought to catalyze collaboration between their manufacturers and specialized providers of such repair services. Companies like Comprelli or Wern Repair are emerging in this space. Because at the end of the day, as the saying goes, waste isn't waste until we waste it. It's about seeing the inherent value where we once only saw trash or a cost center. Conclusion.
Wow. This deep dive into fast fashion has truly opened my eyes to the incredible complexity of this industry. It's huge. It's a fascinating journey from its origins rooted in rapid production and that undeniable consumer desire for newness through the immense economic engine it has become, all the way to the staggering environmental costs and the very real, often hidden human impact on garment workers worldwide. It's far more intricate than just cheap clothes appearing in stores.
It really is. It truly highlights how deeply intertwined our everyday purchasing habits, what we choose to wear, are with massive global economics, intricate labor practices spanning continents, and profoundly the health of our planet. The rapid cycles of fast fashion have delivered undeniable economic success for many, and they've brought trend-driven clothing to people at price points that were previously unimaginable. That accessibility is real. But it has often come at significant and too often hidden costs that resonate across continents and potentially for generations to come. It's a powerful example of, well, unintended consequences playing out on a global scale.
But what's truly fascinating here, and perhaps what gives me the most hope after exploring all this, is that we also see these growing counter-movements. The rise of slow fashion principles, the innovative approaches to textile recycling that are developing, and critically, the concrete ways that waste, even that substantial pre-consumer waste we just discussed, can be dramatically reduced through things like repair and strategic changes within the supply chain itself. It's not just a story of problems, is it? There are emerging, impactful solutions.
Exactly. And that's where the true value of this deep dive lies, hopefully for you listening to. Knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and then applied. The information we've explored today shows us that while the challenges are immense and they are deeply systemic, there are very real opportunities for change. These range from potentially impactful legislative efforts pushing for transparency and better standards to our direct consumer choices, and certainly through innovation and collaboration within the industry itself. It's a landscape of immense challenges, yes, but also incredible potential for transformation if the will is there.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? As we wrap up, next time you're thinking about your next clothing purchase, maybe you're browsing online, maybe you're standing in front of a rack of trendy, incredibly inexpensive clothes. Consider this provocative thought. How much of what you buy is truly valued, designed to last, and consciously created, versus how much is simply a fleeting trend, destined perhaps for a short life and a quick trip to the donation bin, or worse, the landfill? Maybe ask yourself, what small shift in your own consumption habits, whether it's buying fewer items overall, learning to mend what you already have, choosing secondhand first, or simply asking more questions about where your clothes come from and who made them? What small shift could contribute to the collective effort for a more sustainable and equitable fashion future?